Something that was real dumb is these are the bolts that they had holding the brake calipers on. Yeah, that is not the right thread pitch. So the caliper brackets are all stripped out, which is great. Another thing they did that was really stupid was on the old Diff, they didn't get it sealed back in right. So it's just been leaking gear oil for the longest time, and that Diff's pretty much shot. I knew it was leaking when I bought it, and then it was so cheap I didn't care. So this is a used unit off eBay. I just resealed it. Didn't change the pinion seal because it's not leaking, and it's a little bit more work, but it's pretty shielded with this thing, so they usually last okay. Got new axle seals. Of course, the eBay shipper didn't package it very well, and that got bent. So now I got to pack Ultra Gray around it to make sure that doesn't leak. Oh goody. But yeah, I think got a little beat up during shipping. $300. But yeah, I'm gonna throw it in there. Should be good to go. Another thing to look at is your axles. So you can see that this axle is toast. It's been in there for a long time with a bad bearing in the diff. Splines are about shot, but the sealing surface is definitely shot. That's what you want it to look like. Also, I noticed that these two axles are both aftermarket and they're both the same length. On a Foreman 500, or any Honda really, the front axle is supposed to be different lengths. Generally, your right axle is the short axle. So I got to figure out what they did there. Something stupid again. The good news is I have a big pile of axles here, so I can take some apart and probably put a new inner on this guy. That way the seal will seal well and we'll be good to go. What's up, guys? So obviously this Foreman needs a little bit of work, and I knew that when I bought it. That's why it was $3,000. The engine is in very good shape, and that's what I was after. Everything else is pretty easy to maintain. A bottom end, connecting rod issue, that's expensive. So doing some work on the rear end. Rear end's good now. I'm doing the front end. One thing I said wrong there, by the way, is that the left axle is the short one on most Hondas, because the differential, if you look at it, is shifted over to the left in order to keep the drive shaft in line with the engine. But yeah, this is kind of stuff you run into when you buy used stuff. I usually buy new, but I get a lot of feedback on the channel that that's not very realistic for a lot of people. Most people don't want to buy a new machine and then dunk it in water, and I totally get that. I happen to get paid to do it, so a little different scenario for me. So I bought the old Pioneer and the old Foreman to try to show you guys the kind of maintenance you have to do on one of these machines. If you're going to water ride it and it's older, you got to do a lot of maintenance to keep the seals up to date, and you got to replace a lot of parts because they get wore out, and then the seals will not seal onto wore out parts. So you got to maintain your sealing surfaces. But anyway, let me kind of show you how these differentials work and how I fixed it and put a new one in there. On this machine, the right axle is a little bit longer than the left axle. And let me show you what happens if you don't get the right axle. So right now, suspension's at full down travel, and I cannot turn all the way to the right because it's pushing the cup in and it's bottoming out. This axle is a little bit too long. You really have to get the right axles. I really wish these companies would stop doing this. Some of the longer travel axles, like the Cobras and stuff, you can get away with running the same axle on both sides. But if you run long axles on the left side, it's gonna cause steering issues at full droop. If you put a lift kit, it's even worse. All right, so here's the front diff that came out of my new Foreman. When I got it, I knew that the four-wheel drive didn't work, and I saw that the seal was leaking. And then I started playing with this, and I realized that there's some play on the input coupler. And then I started looking at it, and I realized that someone tried to fix the actuator at some point and did a very poor job reinstalling it, which let water in there, which kind of wrecked the whole diff. So we're gonna pop it open and see if any of it's salvageable. Maybe the actuator, at least the innards of the diff will be good. They call them the cam followers. These little pieces in here, I do replace them on people's machines from time to time. Usually if you're running too much lift and a heavy duty axle and an assassinator, you can break the little input pieces there, so I'll save those. But this thing's in pretty rough shape. All right, as I expected, this thing is totally toast. I won't even try to rebuild stuff when it looks like this, because every bearing in here needs to be replaced, and it's really just not worth it to me. But yeah, so this is the mechanism that does your 2- and 4-wheel drive. This shift fork moves like this. This mechanism does your front diff lock. That shift fork moves up and down. So it's a pretty cool little like double cam shift drum, where the end of it moves one fork up and down, and the center of it moves one fork in and out. So yeah, it's a cool little diff, but I mean, this thing is just not worth trying to repair. There's nothing wrong with this diff. It was probably a relay. Someone tried to fix the flashing 4x4, didn't put the actuator in right, and then this happened. So yeah, be careful who you let work on your stuff. So a question I got a few weeks ago is, how do I change the pinion seal on a Rubicon differential? Well, any Honda with front diff lock, aka a Foreman or a Foreman Rubicon, you actually have to split the differential open to change the seal. And I'm going to show you why. So this shaft right here is what I call the input coupler. You see this groove here? There's a snap ring inside of here. So what you have to do is you have to open up the diff, take that snap ring, pop it loose, and move it forward. And then what I do is I put the coupler in a vise, and you can see where I tapped gently with a hammer, and you can pop it apart. Now you can change the seal, put it back together in reverse order. Unfortunately, this differential is grooved so bad on the coupler because of just absolute abuse. All the bearings are shot. So I can't really reuse any of it, so I'm just making a video for how to change the seal with it. But it's all going in the trash, unfortunately. Sad, because these differentials are pretty expensive. That's the snap ring I'm talking about. It goes on that groove right there. You have to get to it from the inside, which is pretty easy if you have the correct snap ring pliers. But yeah, this thing is toast. Gosh. So that right there, that's what engages your four-wheel drive. Those splines coming on and off of there connects this spline to the splines on the pinion gear. We dug a little deeper inside the actual diff itself. These are called cam followers. This is called a cam. It's a crazy diff Honda kind of came up with. It's been running for a while. What I'm after is these pieces right here. This is what your axles plug into, and they can break if you're running really high angles and really big tires with really strong axles. Usually the axle will break first, but yeah, people do break these, usually because they're running too much lift, aka any lift. You really can't put much lift on the front of these diff lock Hondas. But that's how your locker works right there. That slides into there. Well, it slides through these holes, into these holes, and that locks your diff. Pretty neat. So yeah, I'm going to save these guys. They're a little rough, but they're expensive, and you can't buy them separately. You have to buy this whole diff. So those might come in handy one day if I ever break one. I've never broke one. I like to think that's because I know how to drive. I have good throttle control. Also, I don't put my axles at too much of an angle. But yeah, so salvage something, barely.